The matte gray Land Rover Defender came to a stop on the shoulder of Highway 47, a narrow, aging road that wound through the rural outskirts near the Austrian border. Dusk was settling in, the sun retreating behind the tree line, casting thin ribbons of shadow across the asphalt. Inside the vehicle, Amelia Rousseau, clad in dark tactical military uniform, sat motionless. She was adjusting an old GPS unit connected to a military satellite network, equipment restricted to only the highest-ranking military personnel. Nearly 30 seconds passed. She didn't move, a left hand on the steering wheel, right hand lightly tapping the touchscreen. Her fingers drummed a steady rhythm, like the faint soundtrack of a mind tightening with tension. Behind her, red and blue lights suddenly exploded in the rearview mirror. The metallic blare of a police siren shattered the countryside calm. Amelia showed no sign of surprise. She rolled down the window and placed her hands on the wheel in the 10 and 2 o'clock positions. No fear. Not even confusion. Just a sigh, the weary kind that belongs to those who understand that some societal cycles never stop no matter how far they travel. A police officer, white, solidly built, his face flushed from either the weather or his mood, approached. Lieutenant Henrik Meyer. His right hand hovered near his holster, his cold gaze sweeping over the car with undisguised suspicion. License and registration. Now, he snapped, his tone dry and impatient. I'm reaching for them, Amelia replied, her voice neither loud nor soft, but laced with silent authority. She slowly opened the glove compartment, pulled out the documents, and extended them with both hands. Henrik didn't look at the papers. His eyes were fixed on her face, dark-skinned, cold, and composed as if waiting for it to crack or burst into tears. This vehicle has tinted windows. Illegal in this state, he said, still not glancing at her name. Legal for military-registered vehicles, she answered. I can call for verification if necessary. Step out of the vehicle. A command, not a request. Amelia turned her head slowly, her eyes catching the rearview mirror where a silver Volkswagen had pulled over on the opposite shoulder. A man in camouflage uniform stepped out, holding up a phone and recording. His face was serious, his gaze tense. Amelia unbuckled her seatbelt and opened the door. She was tall, upright, her movements fluid like cold water, neither rushed nor slow, just precise. Weapons? Henrik asked, eyes probing. No. I'm a military officer. I left my weapons at base, she replied. Henrik laughed scornfully without restraint. Military? Oh, let me guess. You drive tanks or wash them? Amelia said nothing. She didn't need to. Henrik circled the vehicle, shining his flashlight and running a hand across the rear window. You hiding something in here? No. You're overstepping your authority, she said, voice steady. I want to contact the military base commander in Graz. This is no longer a routine inspection. You're not calling anyone. Hands behind your back. And then the cold grip of handcuffs tightened around her wrists. Amelia's expression didn't change. Henrik pinned her against the hood. The wind picked up. Across the road, the man with the phone began to step onto the shoulder. He pulled an ID card from his chest pocket. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Lucas Klein, 14th Austrian Army Brigade. This woman is General Amelia Rousseau, ranked Major General. You've just made a serious mistake. Henrik turned, stunned. What? Lucas repeated, this time slower and with clarity. She is a Major General. She has the authority to summon an entire battalion if necessary. And you've just placed handcuffs on someone protected by both international law and the Austrian Constitution. At that moment, the low, thunderous roar of helicopter blades rumbled from the distance. Not media. Not medical. Military, precise, heavy, unmistakable. Henrik swallowed hard. She hadn't even made the call. And he had already lost. The wind tore through the roadside trees, bending the willow branches as if in a bow. The sky wasn't dark, but silver gray had consumed the entire expanse. The military helicopter descended with surgical precision as if every centimeter of air had been pre-measured on a tactical map. Henrik Meyer still stood beside the vehicle, one hand on his holster, the other gripping the handcuffs still clamped around Amelia Rousseau's wrists. But what he held was no longer a suspicious woman of color by the roadside. It was a high-ranking military officer. And his entire world, his authority, his confidence, his honor, was being stripped away, layer by ruthless layer. Lieutenant Colonel Lucas Klein stepped fully into the road. The rotor wash from the helicopter flipped his coat open, revealing a brigade insignia and a dull steel nameplate, Klein, L, 14th Armor. He jerked his head toward Henrik. Remove the cuffs. Now. Henrik hesitated. I haven't verified. I need official confirmation. She is the official confirmation. Lucas gritted his teeth and took 2 steps forward, pointing straight at Henrik's face. Behind him, from the helicopter that had landed roughly 200 meters away, 3 figures emerged. 2 were in combat gear. The third was a woman in senior operations uniform, silver hair neatly tied back, her face severe. Brigadier General Elfriede Markov, Deputy Commander of the Central Region, Lucas announced. The last person you want to be explaining anything to. Henrik froze. Salty sweat beaded on his forehead, slipping down past the corners of his eyes. His hand trembled as he searched for the cuff key. When the lock clicked open, Amelia didn't step back. She simply rotated her wrist, looked at the red mark left by the metal, and gave a slight nod as if confirming she was still intact. General Russo, are you injured? Markov asked as she approached. No serious harm, Amelia replied, her eyes still fixed on Henrik. She walked slowly to the Land Rover, opened the door, and retrieved a military ID card, a gold-plated rank insignia, and a secured encrypted phone. I don't need cameras. I don't need press. I just need the system to see itself. Markov turned to Henrik. Lieutenant Meyer, you'll accompany us to the military headquarters in Graz to provide an initial statement regarding the unlawful detention of a protected individual under Article 7 of the European Defense Cooperation Act. Henrik protested weakly. I didn't know. She didn't give her name. No identification. She wasn't required to, Lucas interjected. But you were obligated to verify before escalating force. For the first time, Amelia looked directly at the man who had cuffed her. I don't want your name to become a symbol. I want your actions to serve as a warning. A warning that nothing is more dangerous than an officer who can't control the power he's been given. 3 hours later, in a closed meeting room at the Graz military headquarters, cold white light illuminated a report printed on heavy paper, the bold heading reading. Highway 47 Incident, Preliminary Report on Operational Misalignment between Military and Local Law Enforcement. Amelia sat at the head of the table. No uniform. A white shirt, sleeves rolled, collar neatly fastened, short hair pressed flat against her neck. In front of her lay a highway map, photographs from the scene, and a legal excerpt from the defense charter. Any commanding military officer on duty has the authority to request the suspension of intervention by local law enforcement if such action is deemed to infringe on military jurisdiction. I don't want him permanently stripped of his license, Amelia said, her voice controlled but as hard as concrete. I want him present at a full training course on protocol for engaging with multinational military personnel. And I want the entire session recorded and added to the standard curriculum at the Central Police Academy. A senior officer at the far end of the table nodded. General Russo, your request will be forwarded to the Ministry of the Interior by morning. Amelia stood, folded the documents, and let her eyes sweep across every face in the room. This is not about an individual. The problem is the system's belief that someone like me can't hold this position unless they see the badge before they see the skin. She walked out, leaving behind a silence heavy as lead. The news broke before dawn. Not through print. Not via an official press conference. Just a 2-minute, 34-second phone video recorded by Lieutenant Colonel Lucas Klein, spreading across social media like wildfire in a summer dry field. The footage. A woman of color in camouflage uniform, hands cuffed, her face unflinching. A young white police officer, hand near his holster, refusing to look at the documents. A third figure stepping forward, shouting, "She's Major General Amelia Russo." And finally, the roar of helicopter blades. The internet needed no soundtrack, no color correction, just the truth. And the truth had a face. At a high school in Linz, teacher Anna Meyer played the clip during a civics lesson. She said nothing. Just projected the video on the smartboard. The students watched. Some chuckled at first, the kind of laugh reserved for what they assumed was another YouTube sketch. But then came the line from the officer. You sure you're not impersonating military? Maybe you're a mechanic. Silence crept into the classroom like fog. A brown-skinned boy at the back murmured. If that were my mom, I'd have smashed the camera. But she just stood there. The teacher nodded. And that's the most important point. She didn't resist. A girl raised her hand. So, what would have happened if she weren't a general? If she were just a nurse? Or a driver? No one had an answer. On Austrian national television, the evening broadcast opened with its usual elements. Map, headline, theme music. But the anchor, veteran journalist Reinhard Vogel, appeared with a face more solemn than usual. The incident on Highway 47 is no longer merely a story of administrative overreach. It is a mirror reflecting the slow-burning biases embedded within systems we assume are impartial and just. Major General Amelia Russo, commander of 3 peacekeeping operations, a former speaker before the UN Security Council, was handcuffed by a local officer who hadn't even finished reading her documents. The report was accompanied by images. The same woman inside a crisis coordination room in Kabul. A European Freedom Medal. And then, that same woman forced face down against a dusty car hood. In a small apartment in Vienna, Cyril Russo, Amelia's younger brother and a freelance journalist, sat at his laptop. Beside him, 3 half-drunk cups of coffee. His phone buzzing nonstop. A new email popped up. BBC World was asking, would she be willing to speak at the upcoming NATO Forum on Equality in the Armed Forces in Brussels? He typed a message to his sister. I know you don't like being a spokesperson, but you're becoming something no one dares to be, a mirror that doesn't flinch. Amelia replied with one line. A mirror doesn't choose who looks into it. But once they do, it has no right to turn dim. 3 days later, a group of university students held an open discussion in Heldenplatz. On a massive white cloth, a simple message. I did not fall, I stood still. They didn't shout. They didn't set anything ablaze. They stood in silence for exactly 2 minutes and 34 seconds. Then they dispersed. The media called it the Russo silent stand. At a rare press briefing at the Graz military headquarters, Brigadier General Elfriede Markov addressed the room, her tone clipped. We are not building an image. We are confronting a fact. And the fact is, even those trained to face war must still fight for respect in times of peace. That evening, Amelia sat alone in her small living room in suburban Vienna. Soft yellow light, curtains half-drawn, a cool breeze outside. She played the clip again for the who knows how many th time. She didn't look at the officer. She didn't look at the helicopter. She looked at her own eyes in the video, eyes that did not tremble, did not flinch, did not lower. When the clip ended, she whispered just loud enough for herself. No one should need a rank to be seen as human. Meeting room 12 at the Federal Police Headquarters in Vienna had no windows, no natural light, only the sterile glare of fluorescent lamps, cold as the stares of those seated around the table. On the whiteboard at the front, chalked in deliberate script, Highway 47 Incident, Response and Consequence Management. Oberst Wilhelm Krantz, Deputy Director of the Federal Police, opened the briefing file. His hands were steady, but sweat glistened on his forehead. He had weathered many media crises, from the 2015 refugee camp riots to internal misconduct scandals. But this was different. Ladies and gentlemen, this is no longer an isolated incident. This is the beginning of a public reckoning with the assumptions about our institution. A young officer interjected. General Russo hasn't made a formal legal request. She hasn't sued, hasn't demanded compensation. Krantz raised a hand to silence him. And that is why she's winning. She didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She didn't demand blood. She stayed silent and let the public speak. That's more dangerous than any speech. Ingrid Schuster, the Ministry of the Interior's Director of Communications, flipped through the latest public sentiment analysis. Searches for General Amelia Russo have outpaced international topics for 3 consecutive days. Civil organizations are citing the case as an ethical benchmark. No one's quoting laws anymore. They're talking about justice as instinct. Krantz wiped his forehead. We need to control the narrative. Not to deny it, but to guide it. How? Ingrid asked, doubtful. Pressuring the media will backfire. Attacking her will rally people to her side. And let's be honest, this is a major general. A woman of color. A living symbol. Silence fell. Not the kind that listens. The kind that exposes how slow systems are to confront change they never anticipated. Eric Bauer, police chief of the state of Styria, spoke softly but firmly. Maybe we shouldn't fight it. Maybe we embrace it. Turn her into an ally, not an adversary. All eyes turned toward him. You're suggesting... What? Krantz asked, frowning. Bauer placed both hands on the table. I propose we create the Russo Protocol, we announce it, we lead the reform. If we don't, they will. And if they do, we'll always be on the defensive. Schuster nodded slowly. A voluntary shift feels proactive. A public apology paves the way for a new model, without framing it as defeat. Krantz leaned back in his chair, silent. He knew they were right. He also knew That is the cost of silence. When a system refuses to speak, someone else will tell its story with the truth. At a small cafe in Vienna's Alsergrund district, Amelia Rousseau sat across from her brother, Cyril, the quiet strategist always behind her. "They won't attack you publicly," he said, stirring his espresso. "They'll try to co-opt you, make you their poster, stand you next to them and say, 'See? We're changing.'" Amelia looked out the window, where a group of schoolchildren passed by. A few still wore stickers with the small symbol, R234. "And if they do truly change?" she asked. "Then you've won. And if they pretend to?" she followed. Cyril looked her in the eye, serious. "Then you keep standing. Don't let them turn you into a puppet." Praised on the wall while the ropes still hang beneath. She gave a quiet, tired smile. Not from weariness but resolve. Then we need a next step. Not for revenge, but to keep the movement alive. That evening, in a television studio in Brussels, an official statement was released. Major General Amelia Rousseau has been formally invited to serve as honorary advisor in developing a reform model for civil-military relations across NATO member states. A subheading appeared on the screen. A political move, or the beginning of real transformation. Outside the University of Political Sciences in Vienna, early summer light spilled over old stone steps where Leon Brenner, a final-year public law student, handed out flyers reading, "Justice doesn't wait for rank. Change starts from below." Open Forum, The Rousseau Effect and Civic Agency, Friday 5 p.m., Hall J. Leon, tousled brown hair, tall and thin, wore a worn-out backpack with an R2:34 sticker. The faculty called him too sharp to stay obedient. He wasn't a career activist, didn't give long speeches, but his eyes had the focused sharpness of a scalpel. When the video of General Rousseau in handcuffs went viral, Leon didn't yell like his friends. He watched it 3 times, quietly. He studied how she remained still, how she took control without a single wasted word. And then he made a decision. If someone like her could be cuffed, then someone like me had to act. In Brussels, Amelia sat in a dark meeting room, a large screen displaying data models from social media. A NATO strategic response analyst, Daria Kovacs, pointed at a trend graph. "There's a tonal shift in public discourse, General. Initially emotional support. But now, a small group is raising suspicion. Is she really a victim? Or a political tool to militarize reform?" Amelia crossed her arms. "I assume that's not organic." Daria nodded, sliding the screen. Coordinated activity. Timed posts, repeated language, centered on the message. Blurring the line between military and politics is dangerous. Where from? Some anonymous addresses in Eastern Europe. A few Austrian IPs. Several accounts previously linked to disinformation campaigns against police reform in Germany and France. Amelia stared at the phrase, military politicization. It's an old trick. When they can't discredit the person, they muddy the boundary and feed the fear. Daria added quietly, "Parliamentary questions will follow. Maybe they won't say you're wrong, but they'll say, you shouldn't be here." In Vienna, far-right MP Andreas Wirth stood in a studio, preparing for a political talk show titled National Identity. "I'm not against reform," he told the host off-camera. "I'm against reform led by people trying to turn the military into a social experiment." "And by people, you mean?" Wirth gave a cold smile. "I mean a general, unelected, representing no one but her own authority, imposing values on the entire European security system. That's not reform. That's manipulation." That night, in her secure Brussels apartment, doors key-coded, cameras in every hallway, Amelia checked her phone. Another anonymous email. "It's easy to build a symbol. Easier to destroy one. They don't hate you for your skin. They hate you for not staying silent like those before." She turned off the screen. No change in expression. But inside she knew. Silence was no longer a strategy. It had become the blade they placed in her hand, to make her choose how far to retreat. 3 days later, at Lyon's Open Forum, over 300 students packed into the university hall. sitting on the floor, standing in aisles, live streaming on phones. Leon stepped on stage. No mic, his voice just loud enough. I didn't invite her here today to speak for us. I invited her to remind us that she speaks for no one, but her actions force all of us to speak. The spotlight shifted to the audience. Amelia Rousseau stood and walked to the podium. Someone shouted from the crowd. Are you afraid? She paused, smiling. Yes, I'm afraid every day. Then why keep going? She looked into the sea of student faces, young people still learning how to become citizens with voices. Because fear isn't a reason to stop. It's the reason to never stand alone. And for the first time, the room didn't fall silent. They rose one by one, not out of shock, not because of a video, but because they finally realized they were no longer just witnesses to the fight. They were part of it. The air inside NATO's strategic center in Brussels carried the scent of cold steel, arid air conditioning, and decisions never spoken aloud. Amelia Rousseau walked through the main hall, her ceremonial uniform pressed to perfection, not a single crease. Her steps were slow but resolute. She had attended hundreds of meetings in Kabul, in Geneva, at the Estonian border, but the room ahead held a different kind of air. Not of war, but of post-glory negotiation. In the high-level conference room, stark white lights poured down on a 12-meter-long ebony table. Seated around it, the NATO Security Reform Committee, comprised of delegates from France, Germany, Belgium, Spain, and the United States. At the head sat Eleanor Whitman, NATO's Deputy Secretary General, a British Indian woman with graying hair and a face marked by sharp intelligence, not softness. General Rousseau, Eleanor said, her British accent sharp as a blade, you are under no obligation to accept this role. This is an invitation, not a summons. Amelia took her seat, placed her hands on the table. Her gaze moved from one face to another, unhurried, unafraid. And I'm not accepting it for a pat on the back or to be used as a symbol in promotional materials. A subtle ripple of movement passed down the table. Some leaned back. Others adjusted their recorders. Amelia continued, if you want a symbol, I decline. But if you want me to build training models, rewrite curricula, and plug the policy holes, then I don't need an honorary title. I need a real office, a real budget, and real authority to act. Eleanor smiled, for the first time in the meeting. I was hoping you'd say that. Meanwhile, across the city in a hotel room, a man was watching the live stream on his laptop. Andreas Wirth, far-right conservative MP, former police officer, former head of migration control committees. He sipped a glass of strong liquor, eyes fixed on Amelia's face on screen. So they made her an advisor, he said, half sigh, half sneer. From a news item worth deleting to a political icon. Well done. His aide beside him asked. Do you think she's a threat? Wirth tapped his fingers on the desk. Not her. The effect of her. It's when police officers start fearing being wrong more than fearing crime. When every encounter becomes a racial, gendered, and historical analysis session on camera. He locked eyes with his aide. She's changing the culture of the force. And when you change culture, you don't need laws. You just need people to start questioning themselves. The aide nodded slowly. Wirth smirked, though his eyes remained cold. Fine. If they want her to be a mirror, we just need to crack it. That evening, Amelia sat in her temporary office in Brussels. She opened her laptop. Dozens of emails flooded the screen, journalists, scholars, politicians, even a speaking invitation from Oxford University. She answered none. Instead, she opened a single message. No subject, no signature, sent from an anonymous address. Just one line. Not everyone in uniform is happy you came back. She stared at the screen, silent. She didn't delete it, didn't forward it. She just noted it down, deliberately like a soldier marking coordinates on a map. Before nightfall. 3:42 a.m. Amelia Rousseau's phone vibrated 3 times, then went silent. Not an alarm, not a message, but a level 3 security ping only triggered when a serious breach is detected in a high-ranking officer's personal military files. She was up instantly. No nightlight needed. A few swift gestures and the screen revealed Unauthorized external query into military file, Rousseau, Amelia. Time, 3:39. IP location unidentified, masked through 6-layer VPN. Data accessed, medical records expunged, disciplinary reports, classified battlefield psychological logs. She froze for exactly 3 seconds. Not an accident. Not curiosity hacking. This was a precision strike aimed at the one place few dared touch, files known to exist only within internal military command. At the same time, in a nondescript building on the outskirts of Salzburg, 4 men sat around a glowing screen. The only light came from cascading lines of code on black. The oldest among them, Erwin Hochstetler, former national security advisor, once the shadow behind many crisis management operations, now a freelance lobbyist, nodded slightly. Good. We have what we need. A younger man, clean-shaven, dressed in a label-less shirt, asked, "Is this enough to take her down?" Erwin didn't look at him. "We don't need to take her down. Just crack her." He pressed a key. The data began to sort into 3 categories. Post-combat stress report, noting Amelia had shown signs of chronic insomnia. Record of a strategic dispute with a colonel in Syria, not punished, but archived. A video clip from a closed military session, her voice raised, face fierce, saying, "If you keep treating soldiers of color like decoration, I will throw my rank on the table to break this council's facade." No reprimand. No fault. But now, the fragments would be reassembled on enemy terms. 9 a.m. Hashtag Rousseau Unstable started trending across Twitter, TikTok, Facebook. At the same time, 3 tabloid papers released nearly identical headlines. Threatened a fellow officer, is Rousseau fit to shape security policy? Unresolved combat trauma, insiders express concern over General Rousseau's role. Hero or flashpoint? The comments split in 2 stark directions. Supporters. That so-called outburst is the only way to tell the truth in a room full of masks. Who wouldn't lose sleep after 3 combat tours? That's not weakness. That's being real. Critics. I don't want someone mentally unstable designing my country's policing systems. This is why emotions shouldn't drive policy. In her office in Brussels, Amelia didn't read the headlines. She didn't check social media. She simply stared at the board in front of her, a schematic of NATO-wide law enforcement reform, 4 core goals, 26 action points, and 1 foundational requirement. Internal system trust. The door opened. Eleanor Whitman stepped in without knocking. "Amelia," she exhaled. "You need to respond. Today. If you don't, someone else will fill the silence." Amelia shook her head. "I don't react. I lead. They're just flinching from the old reflex of fear." Eleanor placed a brown envelope on the desk. No name, no logo. But the side stamp was real, Union Advisory Status Review Board. There's a motion to suspend your advisory position pending a review of psychological and political suitability. Who signed it? Amelia asked. "I still on the schematic." A block of MPs, led by Andreas Wirth. Silence. So sharp the air in the room felt ready to explode. Amelia turned to Eleanor. Her eyes gleamed like a blade sheathed for too long. "They want me to apologize for not falling apart. They think I'm a stray pawn. But I'm a queen, Eleanor. And I still have moves left." That night, while TV anchors churned through talking points on combat trauma and uncontrolled anger, Amelia posted a 92-second video. No stage lights. No edits. Just her office. Just the lens. She looked straight into the camera. "I've had insomnia. Because I watched comrades die in front of me. Because I heard children screaming under rubble. And because I knew once I came home in uniform, I would have to fight all over again. This time against prejudice. I've raised my voice. Because I wasn't allowed to stay silent. Because if I didn't speak, thousands like me would remain exceptions, not part of this nation's core strength. If you call that losing control, understand this. My silence on Highway 47 wasn't weakness. It was the proof that true power doesn't need to shout to be believed." She ended with 1 line, quoting the very psychological report they tried to weaponize. "I don't want to forget the battlefield. Because if I do, I won't see the one unfolding right here. In the heart of my own country." The next morning, global headlines shifted tone. Rousseau's surgical counterstrike leaves opponents scrambling. Every combat vet with PTSD understood her. General Rousseau wasn't taken down, she's playing on a new level. The war was far from over. But now both sides knew. The mirror hadn't cracked. It had only begun to reflect deeper, sharper. And no amount of political dust could obscure it anymore. Brussels, late June. The sun blazed outside, but the hallway on NATO headquarters' third floor was cold, quiet, and long like a corridor waiting for judgment. Amelia Rousseau walked through it in a dark suit instead of her military uniform. No medals, no insignia. Nothing left but a name that had become an echo and now a target from both sides. On the door ahead, a sign read, Multinational Security Reform Coordination Committee, Special Session. She opened it and stepped in. 12 people were already seated. 3 stood out. Eleanor Whitman, NATO Deputy Secretary General, her face as composed as marble. General Otto Baumgartner, German military representative who had abstained from the vote on her advisory role. Andreas Wirth, far-right parliamentarian attending under special public policy oversight provisions. Wirth smiled like he was at an elimination round, not a policy discussion. General Rousseau. Or, should I say, Advisor Rousseau? I believe it's time for clarity. Amelia sat, opened her file, didn't bother looking at him. Eleanor began, even-toned and exact, like a judicial scale. This session will determine whether Ms. Rousseau should remain in her senior advisory role in the Multinational Security Reform Initiative. Some propose a reevaluation. Others recommend limiting her content oversight. A few, myself included, would prefer to hear her own decision. The tension was taut. Wirth tilted his head, prodding. You must know if you resign now, you preserve the image, undefeated, untainted, politically exploited but personally untouched. Stay and fail, and you become our case in point that internal reform of a broken system is a fantasy. Amelia said nothing. She opened her file, not papers but a strategic blueprint, 7 steps to restructure multinational security doctrine backed by Daria Kovac's data science team. It included behavior analytics, crisis response simulations, and ethics modeling. She spoke slowly. I know that if I stay and fail, I'll be remembered as a reckless advisor who didn't know when to stop. And if I walk away, I'll be called a seed of a greater movement, then placed on a pedestal where admiration becomes an excuse not to listen. But here's the truth. I never did this to win, or to become a symbol. I did this because I've been in places where law is theory and guns are fact. And I understand now, if a system isn't repaired from the inside, it will be broken from the outside in ways you won't be able to control. General Baumgartner flipped a page, then looked up. Your proposal is highly implementable but will face fierce resistance from local commanders. If it fails, it could stall reform for a decade. Amelia met his eyes. Failure is a possibility, but delaying because we fear failure guarantees it for longer. Eleanor asked, not pushing, just confirming. Your choice, Amelia. Stay on with full executive implementation power? Or withdraw with your reputation intact? Amelia closed her eyes for a breath, then opened them, bright as polished steel. I stay, but not just as an advisor. I want operational authority in 3 pilot nations for 1 year, with full control of personnel, budget, and internal communications. If I fail, I walk. If I succeed, you replicate the model. Wirth smiled, a tight, uncertain smile. You won't get leeway. No more Rousseau's being favored for her skin or gender. Amelia smiled back, eyes unblinking. At last, you're being honest. 2 days later, the Rousseau Pilot Office for Domestic Security Reform launched with branches in Graz, Austria, Toulouse, France, Warsaw, Poland. The initiative was called ARIC. Accountability, recalibration, integrity, structure, empathy. Oversight came from NATO. Execution came from her team. Experts, ex-officers, veterans, sociologists, and students. Among them, Leon Brenner, young policy assistant, the only one without a uniform but carrying the weight of a generation. That evening, as radio hosts declared, General Rousseau has officially re-entered the arena. She stood on the rooftop of the Graz headquarters, tactical map in hand. Cyril called. I heard the news. I also heard what Wirth said on air. This won't be easy. Amelia didn't answer right away. She looked toward the distant Alps where snow melts slowly but always melts. Hard is the reason we have to do it. Cyril paused. You know this could cost you your career, right? She smiled faintly when brushing her close-cropped hair. Careers are what people see. Legacies are what they can't erase. 7:15 a.m. Graz. The first ARSC site was a former Cold War military facility, beige walls, hard terrazzo floors. Now repurposed into a reform coordination center. On its gate, in plain steel, ARIC accountability, recalibration, integrity, structure, empathy. Amelia arrived first. No bodyguards, no entourage, just a file, black coffee, and her combat boots. She moved room to room, each one lit, maps on walls, behavior charts, and real-time training feeds. In Training Room 1, Leon was presenting to a group of mid-level officers. One young white officer frowned. "You're telling us to listen before commanding? Out in the field, kid, I don't have time to be a therapist." Leon didn't react. He pressed the remote. Scenario 1. An officer stops a non-compliant driver. Draws weapon. Chaos ensues. Time 34 seconds. Leon switched clips. Scenario 2. Same stop. Officer keeps distance. Uses neutral language. Calls backup. Time 58 seconds. No weapons. No injuries. 24 extra seconds. In exchange for a life and your department's integrity. The room went silent. Even the skeptic lowered his gaze. From the doorway, Amelia watched, arms folded. Leon had understood what she once said. Change doesn't begin with being right. It begins with evidence that can't be denied. Toulouse, France. Resistance was fierce. Veteran officers submitted a formal protest, calling a rise Brussels overreach and elite politicization of policing. Local coordinator Major Delphine Morin reported via video call. 3 major precincts refused to cooperate. One called the reform a social experiment by colored elites. Not explicit, but the message is clear. Amelia nodded, face impassive. Let them speak. But don't leave them isolated. Send me the list of neutral officers. We start in the center, not persuading opponents or flattering allies. We rebuild from the unshaken middle. Warsaw, Poland. The highest risk site, not due to politics, but a breach. Daria Kovacs rushed into Amelia's office in Graz, pale. We've found tracking code embedded in the internal feedback platform. Amelia's eyes narrowed. Origin. Unknown. But the code uses proprietary language. Accessible only to Tier H2. Only 4 people held H2 access. Amelia. Daria. A systems engineer in Toulouse. Leon Brenner. Amelia froze. Daria whispered. I haven't told Leon. It could be system error or credential theft. But if it's not? Amelia's voice was steel. That afternoon, she summoned Leon. The room dim. Only her desk lamp lit his youthful face, still holding a trace of admiration. Leon, she said. I need to ask you something. And I need you to answer with all the respect you owe yourself. He nodded, silent. Did you access internal Arise training models and export data without authorization? He didn't answer immediately. He looked down. Then up. Then nodded. Yes. But I didn't sell it. I gave it to a research group at University of Vienna. They said they'd anonymize the source. Amelia inhaled. And you believed you had that right? Leon clenched his fists. I thought if you preach transparency, the model should be transparent too. No. I said transparency must be structured. You didn't breach secrecy, you breached trust. And here, trust is our only currency. Leon trembled, not in fear, but in the realization of his irreversible mistake. Amelia continued, voice low but weighty. I'm not angry. I'm disappointed. Not because you made a mistake, but because you thought you could shortcut a road I walked barefoot. She stood, handed him an envelope. You're suspended for 90 days. During that time, rewrite the Arise data sharing protocol the right way. Then present it to the full board. As an officer, not a student. Leon took it. Eyes red. He didn't plead, he bowed deeply. That night, Amelia sat alone in meeting room 3, watching the Arise performance chart scroll across the wall. All metrics were climbing. But she felt no relief. Not from failure, but from the truth. Success will always be under threat, not just from enemies, but from those standing beside you. The door creaked open. Daria entered with 2 cups of tea. Was he malicious? She asked. Amelia shook her head. No. Just inexperienced. He thought good intentions were enough to act correctly. Daria sat beside her. So you're keeping him? I'm keeping anyone who still learns. Because whoever replaces me someday will need to walk barefoot too if they want to know how jagged this road truly is. They clinked glasses. No toast. No celebration. Just a quiet pact between 2 women who understood. Changing a system requires more than ideals. It demands discipline, patience, and the kind of forgiveness that is never blind.